Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to cover. The NBA Finals officially begin tonight. We will be doing our official predictions. I know we did one a couple days ago, but my feelings actually have changed since then, so I'll explain all of that and do the official Sports by GSMC Podcast prediction on the show. We're also going to talk about the Lakers coaching situation. It has flip-flopped back and forth between J.J. Redick and Dan Hurley, the current coach of the UConn men's basketball team, the back-to-back NCAA March Madness champions. We'll talk about everything that's happening there. Then we'll move into some NFL football. We'll talk about the Dolphins. We'll talk about a potential 18-game season. We talked about it from the owner's standpoint, but we haven't talked about it from the player's standpoint. So we'll talk about what some of the players, what Joe Burrow is saying about it, and much more. And then we're going to end off our show today on a little bit of hockey coverage. We're going to save our NHL Stanley Cup Finals predictions for tomorrow, but we are going to talk a little bit about the new franchise. The Arizona Coyotes moved to Utah. They have narrowed their name search down to 6. We're going to talk about those names, how they came to it, and the entire story with that franchise. So stick around for that. Before we get into the NBA, though, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you for sticking around, tuning in, and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Thursday afternoon here. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today with the NBA Finals. Everything in the NBA season culminating up to this. The finals begin tonight. The Dallas Mavericks, the 5 seed out of the West, led by Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, with their two big guys, Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, down low. They have cruised their way. I won't say cruise. They have fought their way through the Western Conference, a really tough Western Conference battle bruised. They come off a huge win, maybe the biggest win of the postseason in Game 6 against the Minnesota Timberwolves, destroying them in their own building. They dominated that whole series against the Thunder. They overcame a pretty poor performance by Luka and really just great defense on him by the Thunder. They were able to overcome that and move on to the Western Conference Finals. And obviously in the first round, they beat the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that is kind of the old version of the Mavericks in a lot of ways when you look at the way they're built. But they make it to the NBA Finals today, taking on a Boston Celtics team that, if you had to describe them in one word, it would be juggernaut. There's no other way to describe it. They won 64 games. They made the East look like a cakewalk. Not to say that the East wasn't a cakewalk. It wasn't the strongest conference to begin with, but they made it look easy. They only lost 2 games the entire way. They did get a little lucky. The best player, the star on each team that they played, did go down with injuries. No Jimmy Butler for the Heat series, no Donovan Mitchell for the Cavs series, no Tyrese Halliburton for a little bit of the Pacers series, but they were still able to make it look easy. And this Celtics team, deservingly so, is being called a super team. We have an incredible matchup being set up here for the NBA Finals, one with plenty of storylines. Kyrie Irving returns home to take on a team that was supposed to be his. If you remember back when the trade happened, Tatum and Brown were on this team. They were much younger then, but this team, this current iteration of the Celtics, was supposed to be Kyrie Irving's team. He now goes as the second option on the opposing team in the NBA Finals. Kristaps Porzingis, former Dallas Mavericks Maverick after being traded there from the Knicks, then goes to the Wizards and is traded again to the Boston Celtics, making his way around full circle. This should be a really fun series, and I'm very excited for it. There are, like I said, plenty of storylines back and forth across the entire, on both sides of the lines here. Who is going to get their first championship? Luka? Is it going to be Luka, or is it going to be Tatum? And where does this put them in their legacy? That's a whole nother conversation. We will have that later. But for this one, we're going to talk about this series a little bit. The Celtics' strength, defense, and three-point shooting. And that is a incredible strength to have in the NBA nowadays. You talk about a team that's built from the outside in, that is the Celtics. They put up the most three-pointers in out of everybody in the NBA. They make the most three-pointers out of everybody in the NBA. Their philosophy, very much so, is 3 points is more than 2, and we are going to live and die by the 3 ball. So as much as that is their strength, it also is their weakness. It's not a shot you expect to make 50% of the time. It's a shot you expect to make 35% of the time, which for the Celtics is good enough. There's a reason they have been this great of a team. Outside of the big two in Brown and Tatum, you have Derek White, you have Drew Holiday, you have a healthy Kristaps Porzingis coming back, all of whom can shoot from 3. Al Horford, coming off the bench, can shoot from 3. They go 6, 7, 8 deep with great three-point shooters, and that is incredibly hard to defend, especially as a Mavericks team, and for a Mavericks team that, while they might have the best player in the playoffs right now in Luka Doncic, arguably the best player in the world, and a greatly experienced second option in Kyrie Irving, a guy who has hit a game-winning Game 7 final shot in his career to beat the 73-win Warriors. A huge shot, a historic shot. He has the accolades to show that he can be there. They are not super well built to defend the 3. If you look at their run, if you look at the way that the Mavericks have been able to advance through this postseason, a lot of it has been on their defense. As great as Luka has been offensively, as great as that whole team has been offensively, a lot of what they've done has been predicated on their defense, specifically their interior defense with the twin towers of Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, that huge trade that they made, swinging at the All-Star break, swinging for Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. They made a huge move, and it's paid dividends. It was absolutely the most impactful trade of this entire postseason, and of this entire season, and you could see immediate results. Immediately, they went from having one of the worst defenses in the league to, if you look at just the last third of the season, they had a top 5 defense in the league. Now, Boston, on the other hand, also has a great defense. Drew Holiday is one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire league. Kristaps Porzingis is a great defender down low and has the length and agility and athleticism to go defend outside. And that's really where my concerns start to come in with this Mavericks team. This Celtics team was so good that this would have been considered a disappointment of a season if they hadn't made the NBA Finals. And now that they've made the NBA Finals, the bare minimum, for their team, or at least what I expected out of their team, the bare minimum has been met. You come here with now a kind of weight lifted off your shoulders. You're not going to be listed as a loser if you don't win this, and you obviously will. There's going to be people in the media. People don't like Boston. Every single poll I've seen has had this be a very close series, and I don't blame them. This is a very close series. Luka has been playing the best basketball in the playoffs right now. The way he's playing, it's almost impossible to defend him. But Boston hasn't really woken up yet. We talked about the beginning of the Timberwolves Nuggets series. The Nuggets hadn't really woken up, and I think the Celtics are in a very similar situation where they've kind of been coasting their way through the playoffs. And we saw them get challenged a little bit with Indiana, where they had to play a couple close games down the stretch, and their defense showed up down the stretch, but not their offense. Their defense has been there, and that's been a huge thing, but that clutch offense is something that has been missing for them. So if I'm looking at this series, I expect the Celtics to start a little slow, but once they get that punch in the gut, once they get that first big loss, and maybe that happens after Game 1, I think that first big loss could have happened in Game 1 against the Pacers, but they ended up pulling that one out, so they went back to their little nap afterwards. We saw them dominate a little more in Game 2, but then, they kind of relaxed a little more. You can't relax in the NBA Finals. This is where you need to come out full force, full steam ahead, everything you got. This is the last 7 games of basketball, and you just need to win 4 of them. The Boston Celtics need to come out with a fire, and I don't think they will at the beginning. I don't think, like I said, I think they're kind of groggy right now. They're half awake. That one punch to the gut is going to get them going, So, how I expect this series to go. I expect the Mavericks to take one at home, game 1, potentially even game 2. I don't know about game 2, but game 1 I expect the Mavericks to take on the road in the Garden, the TD Garden in Boston. That should be enough of a wake-up call for Boston. I have this series going 7, and I think just the depth on Boston is going to be just a little bit too much for the Mavericks to handle. Like, you can stop Tatum on a night, but on that night, Derek White's going to show up. Jaylen Brown is going to show up. We saw Jaylen Brown play a huge part in that conference finals series. He won conference finals MVP, deservingly so. It's very exciting. This is going to be a fun series. This isn't going to be one of those blowout series, and even if the games are going to be blowouts, I think there's going to be plenty of exciting moments. So I'm very excited to see what happens in this series. When it's all said and done, I have the Boston Celtics in 7 games. That home court advantage is going to be huge. No one is more there's not many cities that are more passionate than Boston, and especially Boston in the postseason is a really tough environment to go to. They have a history with Kyrie. That's going to be fun. I'm really curious to see how Kyrie comes out in this series. X factors in this series are for the Celtics. It's going to be your tier 2 starters, that being Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis. How are they going to perform? Obviously, we're kind of taking out the equation. We're saying Brown, Tatum, Kyrie, and Luka are all going to kind of cancel themselves out with their good play. I'm taking the tier 2 starters on Boston, and the Mavericks X factor is going to be is going to be their exterior defense. I don't know if they can keep up, if their interior defense is going to be good, but I'm not sure if they can hold the Celtics out on offense. Yes, I did. As Eric said, my original prediction was Mavs in 6. I have switched it to Celtics in 7. I just don't think that too big lineup is going to be able to handle the perimeter offense, the perimeter for the outside in offense of the Celtics as much as they had with their other teams in the West. I do think this is going to be a fun series, though. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this series. Let me know if you think I'm right, you think I'm wrong. We will keep an eye on this as it continues to go. But heading into our next segment, we're going to finish off our NBA coverage talking a little bit about the LA Lakers and where they are at with their coaching search. They kind of had it seemingly locked in with JJ Redick, and now all of a sudden they're switching it out to UConn coach Dan Hurley. We will talk about all the drama, all the craziness going on with that, coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world, please don't give me a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the face shit. I look around, I feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up in the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that sound. Hitting my way and to be put down. Hitting replace all this my sound. I want that shit, but I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the music fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid ninja. Choose to live, choose to dip, you choose to fight, or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished covering the NBA Finals. They begin tonight. Very excited for it. I had the Celtics in 7. You can go and watch my breakdown in that first segment. We are going to continue with our NBA coverage here in the second segment. Talk a little bit about the Lakers, the other major franchise. They are in the midst of a coaching search that has continued to be insane from start to finish. So we'll talk about all of that in just a second. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But yeah, like I was saying, we are going to talk a little more basketball here. The Lakers head coaching situation. And the rundown, it seemed like they had already, there was a report by Shams Charania, NBA insider for The Athletic and FanDuel, that had said, hey, seems like the Lakers are zeroing in on JJ Redick. JJ Redick, who does a podcast with LeBron James. JJ Redick, who was an NBA player for a very long time, one of a very successful NBA career, 3-point specialist, very smart, very good at, had high basketball IQ, and he's showing it off on that podcast with LeBron. That comes out with mixed reactions. JJ Redick has never been a head coach. They're coming. The main complaint with Darvin Ham, their former head coach, is that he made mistakes because he was inexperienced, and you're just going to throw that out the window because LeBron James's friend is JJ Redick. We don't know how much LeBron James has a say in coaching. We know that LeBron himself is saying he has none, but if the front office truly believes that, there's no way that JJ Redick would even make this far into this conversation, to be honest. And I'm a fan of JJ Redick. I think he could be a good coach. But if he's skipping all the steps, going right to head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers like that, that is a little bit suspicious. I think he has a future in coaching. Absolutely. He's got the mind for it. You see him. He has respect around the league. He's an NBA vet. He knows what he's talking about. And that's really the minimum that you need to be a coach. But I feel like you can't just jump off of the media couch and right into head coach in the NBA for the first time. But now the head coaching, Woj came out last night, and said, hey, Dan Hurley is the guy that they want. Dan Hurley is currently the head coach for UConn's men basketball. He has taken that program to 2 straight NCAA March Madness championships, something that hasn't been done since the Florida Gators did it back in 04, 05, 05, 06, I forget. It's been a very long time. He is absolutely qualified to be a head coach. It's going to take a lot of money to get him out of UConn. I believe he signed an extension not too long ago for a big bag. But coaching for the Lakers is a big deal. Getting a guy out of a major college program is a huge deal. That is something that can set up your team for success. Now, there is a history of college coaches not always working out. Obviously, the college game is a lot different than the professional game. You know, you have a lot more control in the college locker room. Everything goes through you. You are kind of like a dictator when it comes to the professionals, not just basketball, but football and all these other sports as well, where we see this kind of thing. You know, Nick Saban, for instance, didn't work at the NFL level because he wanted to have all the control. So he goes back to college and is the greatest college coach of all time. Now, I'm not saying Dan Hurley's the greatest college coach of all time, but it can be a very similar situation where he's not going to have all that control. And that's something that could be an issue. But Dan Hurley's very well respected. He obviously knows what he's doing. He has continued to not only bring in great talent at UConn, but he's also continued to keep talent. There's some of their best players. They ran it back again last season. Not too many went to the NBA draft, even though a lot of them would have gone drafted. And the same thing this year. A lot of them committed to stay at UConn rather than go to the draft. And I'm curious, I know a lot of that is because of the coach. You know, maybe, I'm sure some of it is because of NIL money and they know they'll get drafted later. But some of it is because of the coach. And if he ends up leaving, none of this is confirmed. Nothing in the Lakers head coaching search is officially done yet. There's just conflicting reports from Woj and Shams, the two top dogs in NBA insidering. Kind of have their fights. They always have their fights. But one is going to be right and one is going to be wrong. Woj is very adamant in saying that Shams is incorrect. This report is completely wrong. But the Lakers still haven't hired a coach, and if Dan Hurley is actually their guy, which for my money is the better option. Dan Hurley, I believe, would be a better head coach right now than JJ Redick. And again, nothing against JJ Redick. I think he could be a great coach, but I don't think he's ready to be an NBA head coach right away yet. I think he needs to get some experience in the coaching field first before he just jumps right up to be a head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. Dan Hurley, I think, is the better hire, but he's already had people commit to go to UConn for another year. Then UConn has to scramble and get another head coach, and this isn't going to affect UConn too much because they have these guys, and maybe they'll enter the portal, go somewhere else, but it kind of hurts them because maybe they go to the NBA this year instead of staying at college another year, and I'm sure there's more motivations than just the coach. But it's part of it, and I'm sure it's going to take a lot of money to get Dan Hurley out of there because he seems like he really loves coaching at UConn. And I know college coaches saying that they want to stay forever doesn't mean anything. I just finished my degree at James Madison. We had both our head coach for football and our head coach for basketball say that they wanted to stay and immediately get poached for bigger programs. This is not something that coaches have their words that they say this and then they're definitely staying. A lot of times when they say that, they immediately go. But that's for better opportunity, better money, and I completely understand it. It's going to take a lot of money to get him out of UConn, a team that might win a third straight national title because they're able to keep their team together and they're that good. That is something that is hard to pass up. It's so hard to pass that up. And I'm curious to see what happens. Like I said, if I was the Lakers front office and I was in charge of hiring a new head coach, I'm taking Dan Hurley if I have my pick. But Dan Hurley seems like a golden goose. He seems like a guy that, you want him. He's your number one wish, and you are not guaranteed to get him. He might just say no to the job, so you have to have a backup. And JJ Redick seems like a backup plan. Not my favorite backup plan, but I bet you he'll be a solid NBA coach. I'm curious to see how this goes, how this turns out. But there's a lot of news still to figure out. Right now, it looks like Dan Hurley is in the lead, and we'll see if he ends up taking the job. Honestly, I don't think he will. I think he might stay in college and try and go for that three-peat, which is going to be crazy, spurning the Los Angeles Lakers on a head coaching deal. But some guys just want to stay in college, and Dan Hurley says he wants to go to the NBA, but I don't know if this is really the team he wants to do it for. An old team that's kind of falling apart on its last legs. You only really get one shot at it, and you want to make sure that your shot is the best one. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to move away from NBA coverage. We are going to move into the world of the NFL. We've got a couple big stories coming out of camp. Players are reacting to a potential 18-game season. We'll talk about what guys like Joe Burrow have said about that and what his potential solution is. And then we will talk about the Dolphins and Tua, their situation with their contract, what the Dolphins might do, what they should do, and how that kind of dynamic is playing out right now. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished our NBA basketball coverage, talking a little bit about the Lakers coaching search, that being between JJ Redick and the current head coach for the UConn men's Huskies team, Dan Hurley, trying to lure him into the NBA away from the two-time defending national champions in college basketball. We also talked about the NBA Finals. That starts tonight. I had Celtics in 7. You can hear all about my breakdown for that in the first segment. But we are going to move away from NBA coverage for the rest of the day here. Talk a little bit about the NFL. The NFL is starting to wake up again. We had our little off season, and it wasn't much of an off season. There was plenty going on, so much coverage there. But now it's starting to wake up again. Mini camps are coming back. They're starting to creep their way back to the top of the headlines. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. There's potential 18 games that the NFL is talking about moving to. There's some reactions from players, some solutions from players. We'll talk about all of that in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to say, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me on this beautiful Thursday afternoon here in June. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to jump into some NFL coverage with the potential of an 18-game season. We've talked about it. Sports leagues getting greedy. We've talked about it in the context of a lot of things. 18 games feels like an inevitable thing, though. And it doesn't feel too greedy either. The NFL has set out a very nice plan for 18 games. One that, as a fan, I am very much in support of. They talk about adding that 18th game, adding a second bye week, and making it so the Super Bowl falls on Memorial Day weekend, or holiday weekend. I forget which holiday it would be on, but you'd have Monday off is the deal with that. So you would have a little Super Bowl day off, something that I know when I was younger, I always wished we had, and that's been a thing that I know a lot of people want, a day off after the Super Bowl, and that's how it would work if it moves to 18 games. So as a fan, I'm partial to this 18-game system. I'm a big fan of how it would line up in the calendar. I'm just worried that they're going to continue to expand, because that's how sports leagues are. Hey, we can get more money by adding more games. Let's do that. I think 18 is the perfect number. I really do. I don't think there's a need to expand it any further than 18, but I think 17 isn't quite it. I like having a nice even number. You have the same amount of home games as road games. That's kind of been thrown off balance in that 17-game thing, and I know they fixed it with their alternating years, but still, it's one of those things that it's nice to have evenness on the schedule when you're talking home and road games for both fans and the business side of teams, make a little money for everybody. But there are some interesting solutions put out there. The Colts seemingly against it, and I understand player arguments. Player injury, they're all about player safety, and I'm all for player safety. The sport is no fun if you don't have people playing it, right? You need these players to be safe, you need them to be healthy, and adding another game just gives you another chance to get hurt, right? And I completely understand that argument. You add another bye week, something that players have been asking for a long time, and Joe Burrow had an interesting discussion about that bye week. Every other sports league has a mid-season Pro Bowl, has a mid-season All-Star game. Joe Burrow says, hey, why don't we do that? Add a second bye week as that mid-season break. Not sure how that would work. It is an interesting idea. It's not something I'm against. But would you play an actual game there? How would that work? Because if you're giving everybody equal chance to take a break, do these all-star players not get a break anymore? Are they going to have an extra couple days off as well? How is that going to work with their team? So there's a couple of logistics to work out there that I don't think an entire league-wide week off would work. And that's also kind of not how the NFL seems like they want to do it. They want to have games every single week. They want Sunday to be their day. They want Monday to be their day. They want Thursday to be their day. They're taking Saturdays now. They're moving to Fridays. They want the whole week. They want football every single day. And as a fan, I'm not opposed to that. But they are going to, push for this 18-game schedule. And I think it's fine as long as, and this is the big caveat, there is that second bye week. You get situations where players have a week 5 bye week and they play 12 straight games. They make the playoffs, they don't get that bye in the wild card round, and potentially they make it all the way to the Super Bowl. They get another bye week right before the Super Bowl. But if you have a week 5 bye week and you come as a wild card team to the Super Bowl, you play like 15 straight games, and that is not easy on anyone. Injuries are a huge thing in sports, and you never want that to be the main story. But football is such a physical sport that these guys need another break. You can spread it out the same way you do. If you have an 18-game schedule, there's no reason for guys in a regular season of 18 games to be playing more than 5, 6 games in a row. You have 2 bye weeks. It gives players a chance to rest. It gives them a chance to heal up. Better players, healthier players, rested players leads to better products on the field. That's why Thursday Night Football kind of sucks, because these players aren't rested. They're not able to install a full game plan. They're not able to go all the way out, and you see that's why players hate Thursday night games, honestly. There's a lot of, pros and cons to these, but it's the same kind of idea with a bye week. I think you can convince NFL players to go to 18 games, and I know there's a lot of players that aren't in favor of 18 games, but it has to have that bye week. You're not getting another game without another bye week. They were able to get it with 17, but you are not getting another one without another bye week, and that is just non-negotiable. For a player, as a fan, I want these players to be able to get the rest, and yes, I want to see football 24/7. I love football, but you have to be realistic here. It's really hard on these players' bodies, and more than wanting to see football, I want to see the best players play football, and this bye week is the best way to get it done. So there's lots of different situations here. I do think that this 18-game season is inevitable. I don't see a world where it doesn't happen. The NFL, it gets what it wants. The NFL is that kind of league. They do what they want. They get what they want. They'll get it eventually. If not now, they'll get it 5 years from now. If not 5 years from now, they'll get it 20 years from now, so on and so forth. They're going to get this eventually. And I really do think that this is good for the league. My one concern is if they continue to expand. Now, you can get rid of preseason games. That's another thing that players want. And preseason, whatever. That doesn't really do much. We get a little extra football, but it's bad football. Starters play like one drive sometimes. You get a bunch of guys fighting for roster spots, and that's always fun to watch. But the preseason doesn't really matter. People, you don't need the preseason. It's not that common that injuries happen in the preseason, but they do happen, and it can be devastating, and that's something you want to avoid for games that simply don't matter. But preseason can be gone, but I don't want this league extending past 20 or past 18, excuse me. And I can very, very realistically see a world where the NFL is like, hey, let's continue to expand until we hit a wall like we do in the NBA. And I know the NBA hasn't expanded, and it's kind of a process of just players getting better, but 82 games is too much for that. And you're never going to go down, but it's why the regular season kind of gets deflated in the minds of fans, in the minds of players, in the minds of everyone around the league. That's one of the beautiful things about football. The regular season matters so much. The more you expand the regular season, the more games you add, the less and less these games start to matter. And 18, I think, is the perfect number. If you get to 20, I think you're starting to push it to a point where maybe week 5 against a bad team doesn't matter. You can rest some people that really need to rest. 18, I think, is the biggest number you can have with the way the league is right now. And I don't believe the NFL has the ability to stop itself if this gets passed. And that's the one thing I'm worried about. I hope they know when enough is enough, and you got to sit, and sometimes you just got to rest and sit on your hand. This is what you got. This is what you need to deal with. But we'll see what happens in the future. 18 games is inevitable, and I hope that's all it gets to. But anyway, in our next segment, we are going to finish up our NFL coverage, talking a little bit about the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, and the situation with their contract negotiations. Tua wants a new contract. The Dolphins probably want to give him a new contract. We'll see what happens there. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the potential for the NFL expanding to 18 games and possible solutions, the ups and downsides for a move like that. We also finished talking about the NBA earlier. We talked about the NBA Finals starting tonight between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. I have Boston in 7 in that one. We also talked about the whole fiasco, the whole craziness going on with the Lakers head coaching search between JJ Redick and Dan Hurley and anybody else that they might be looking at, the whole crazy situation going on there. In this segment, we are going to finish up our NFL coverage, focus in on the Miami Dolphins a little bit. Tua Tagovailoa is looking for a new contract. Will the Miami Dolphins give it to him? What are they saying about him at camp? Everything like that. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. The link on the screen right now, gsmcpodcast.net. If you have a burning question, or if you leave a message, that message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, tuning in, and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to continue our NFL coverage here today, talking a little bit about the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins opened up their camp this week along with 9 other NFL teams. We talked a little bit about some of them in a show earlier this week. What I want to focus on today is Tua's specific situation with the Dolphins and whether or not he is going to and if he deserves a new contract with the Dolphins. Because there's a lot of train of thoughts here, right? Tua Tagovailoa has just led the Dolphins on an incredibly high-powered offense and an incredibly high-powered offense to the playoffs where they kind of fell flat. And I don't want to say that's all Tua's fault, because it isn't. Really, everything kind of went bad for the Dolphins down the stretch. They got incredibly hurt, the defense imploded, and cold weather does not help an offense like the Dolphins. But also Tua didn't help the situation. You know, he didn't make any of those plays that you expect an elite quarterback that wants to get paid $55+ million a year to make. You know, he's not out there making these game-changing, game-winning decisions. He is very much a system quarterback, and he's in an elite system right now. Don't get me wrong. You keep him in that system, he has the chance to rack up awards, plenty of them, because he is that good. But that is because he has been surrounded by elite talent. You have speed all around you in Miami. And when you play in Miami on a hot day, that speed, not only does speed kill normally, but that speed, that effect is almost doubled in the hot sun of Miami. So that is a killer team. You have very fast wide receivers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Extremely fast backfield with Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. You know, this was a great offense last season, and The defense was good when it was healthy. The issue is the defense has, again, it got too expensive. They chose to pay the offense. They paid Jalen Waddle. They had already paid Tyreek Hill. They let Christian Wilkins walk, which I think is going to be a huge loss. They've cut their corners in Xavier Howard, who comes off the books soon. His money does, and Jalen Ramsey. These guys, kind of anchored a defense here. And a lot of them are gone. This defense still has a lot of upside. You still have Hollins out there. You still have Van Ginkel at linebacker. This is a defense that could be sneaky good. It's not going to be an elite defensive unit, but they need that defense to step up, and they need them to make plays if they want to be true Super Bowl contenders, which I don't think they are right now. Tua doesn't elevate a team the way you want a franchise elite quarterback to do. And we're kind of entering a discussion where, for me, it's not worth paying a quarterback if you don't think he can win you a Super Bowl. And we kind of delved into this conversation a little bit with the Jared Goff situation. Jared Goff just got paid $52 million earlier this offseason. I don't think he's a guy that can win you a Super Bowl, and maybe Detroit does. And if Detroit believes that he's a guy that can win you a Super Bowl, pay the man. But quarterback is such an important position, and the goal of your season every year is to win the Super Bowl. The goal of your season is not to be good. It's not to be great. The goal of the season is to win the Super Bowl. And if you have a quarterback like the Dolphins do in Tua, that who with him on your team can be great. Your team can win divisions. Your team can be a threat in the AFC. I don't think the Dolphins under Tua Tagovailoa have the potential to win a Super Bowl, at least not how the team is right now. And it only gets harder to build a team if you drop $60 million into one guy. I am not prepared, if I am the Dolphins GM, to drop $50+ million into Tua's lap. Tua is a quarterback that can get the job done, and I'm willing. I want to see what he does this season, because he was able to stay healthy last season, and we saw what he did. He has cut down a lot. He's a lot skinnier now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It helps with mobility. He's not really a runner, though. It shouldn't affect the main concern, which is his head injuries, which he was able to avoid. But behind an offensive line that can be hurt at times isn't the greatest in the league. They let one of their better offensive linemen walk as well. Not having that padding to take a big hit, it's gonna hurt a little bit, and I hope Tua can handle it. He was skinnier in college. He was able to make these throws in college, was a little more athletic, so maybe this will help. But I'm not ready to sit down and pay Tua the big money yet. I don't know if he can stay healthy, and I'm especially not convinced that he can win a Super Bowl with Miami, that he's a quarterback that can win a Super Bowl. And we've seen time after time recent examples of quarterbacks getting paid that did not have that Super Bowl upside and how it's kind of hurt teams. One example, the Giants with Daniel Jones. He won a playoff game, and then it kind of felt like the Giants had to pay him, right? The Giants did a good thing, and they made it so they had an out after year 2, which is this year. They have an out after this year, so they weren't super locked in, but they still gave him a $40 million contract. Not a good look. The Baker Mayfield situation with the Buccaneers. It's a fine contract. I think Baker's better than Daniel Jones. Do I think he's a quarterback that can win a Super Bowl? Absolutely not. I don't think that he's worth that money. And a lot of these teams don't always have better options. So they feel like, hey, I'd rather rock with the poison we know than what we don't, right? And that is not a healthy approach to team building, I don't think, right? You can have a great team year in, year out, but if you don't have a team that can compete for Super Bowls, you're kind of in football limbo. You're not going to be bad enough to get that elite talent, but you're not going to be good enough to lift the Lombardi Trophy. And if you're kind of stuck there, you're just kind of fine. And it's not a spot that you want to be in. Now, I'd rather be there than bad, but And it's a scary thing for front offices to do because their jobs ride on it. It's not like me as an analyst saying, hey, if you're not going to win a Super Bowl, blow it up. My job is not riding on them being good. Coaches, GMs, players, their jobs are riding on them being good. So this is not an approach that will be taken by anyone, right? If you have the opportunity to be good, you're going to take that opportunity to be good 100%. So I expect Tua to get paid. But my bigger point with this is we're getting to the point where we can't just expect quarterbacks to reset the market every single time they're up for contract. Tua, I hope, doesn't reset the market. Dak might reset the market. I'm not sure if he deserves it. Trevor Lawrence is a guy I think deserves to reset the market. There's other people that don't think so, but I think Trevor Lawrence is absolutely worth resetting the market over. Jared Goff didn't reset the market, and that's fine. That's the kind of contract that I think should be given out to above average quarterbacks, not market resetting money. And I think it's a healthy approach. You don't need to be that number one paid quarterback if you're not being talked about as that number one quarterback, right? If you're not in conversations to be an elite quarterback, you shouldn't be getting elite quarterback money. And that's a tough pill to swallow because your job as a GM, as a coach, is riding on these guys, and good quarterbacks and a great team around them can be very successful, as we've seen with the Dolphins, with the 49ers, lots and lots of examples of this team building strategy working. But one thing is that none of those guys have won a Super Bowl. And you need that quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I don't think these guys have what it takes. So I wouldn't pay the quarterbacks. But that's just my philosophy without too much of a stake riding on it. I expect him to get paid, and I expect him to get paid $50+ million. Lots to think about, though. We'll see what happens in the future. I don't think he gets paid until after this season anyway. I don't think the Dolphins are convinced he can stay healthy, so he needs to stay healthy for one more season to earn that contract. But anyway, in our next segment, we are going to finish off our show away from football into the world of hockey. I know the Stanley Cup playoffs are right around the corner. They start on Saturday, the Stanley Cup final, so we will do our Stanley Cup predictions tomorrow. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the brand new franchise out there in Utah. They have narrowed their name search down to 6 names. We're going to go through them, talk about what name I think they should go with, and everything else surrounding that move to Utah. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished our NFL coverage talking about Tua and the situation that he has put the Dolphins in and the contract negotiations, whether or not he deserves a new contract. We talked about the potential of an 18-game NFL schedule coming up soon, what some of the players think, and what I think needs to happen there. We also talked some basketball earlier on the show. The Lakers apparently moving in and hiring Dan Hurley over JJ Redick. We talked about everything going on in their head coaching search, and we talked about the NBA Finals. I had the Boston Celtics taking down the Dallas Mavericks in 7 games. We talked about all of that. But in this segment, we are going to close out our show today talking a little bit of hockey. The Arizona Coyotes have officially moved to Utah, and they have dwindled down their name choices to 6. We're going to talk about what those names are, which one I think is the best one, and much more, everything surrounding that, coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off our show today talking a little bit of hockey. The Stanley Cup playoffs, the Stanley Cup Finals, right around the corner. We're going to do our official predictions for that tomorrow. But right now, I want to talk a little bit about the new franchise out there in Utah. The Arizona Coyotes officially done. They have an opportunity to get their franchise back if they can build a stadium. One of the biggest issues in there was that they didn't have a stadium. They were playing at Arizona State, which is kind of crazy. But they now officially moved to Utah. They have a brand new stadium being built. It's supposed to fit like 17,000 people. Nice arena over there in Utah. But they need to pick a new name. They're not going to be the Arizona Coyotes. They're not going to be the Utah Coyotes. This is a brand new franchise. The record for the Coyotes are staying in Arizona. Wipe the record books clean. This is going to be brand new record holders for everything this season. And that's an exciting place to be. Brand new franchise, starting new. You get to see yourselves in the history books, regardless of how good or bad you are. And that's always very exciting. New names as well come with this. And what Utah did is they did a fan vote. They chose like 64 names, March Madness style, and they have whittled it down to 6. There are 6 names in the running now for this new Utah hockey franchise. We're going to run through it real quick and let me know what you guys think should be the name. But here's what we've got. We have the Utah Blizzard, the Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, the Utah Outlaws, the Utah Venom, and the Utah Yeti. Interestingly, and I like a lot of these names. I like the idea where they're going. We've seen, and this is kind of a knick-knack kind of thing, but we see a lot of names end in plural S's. There's only one of those that ended in plural S, and obviously we had the Seattle Kraken come in kind of along the same line, no S at the end, but it's kind of rare that we see it, and now I think 5 out of those 6 did not have that S, which is really interesting to see. I like some of these names. My favorite one heading into it was the Utah Yetis. I like the idea of that just has a lot of marketing idea. You can get a fun little mascot in there. Cold in Utah, the Blizzards, a great one. The Mammoth has a fun one as well. You could dress up your little Zamboni in a little mammoth costume. I feel like that could be a little bit of opportunity there. There's a lot of great ideas with all of these names. I don't think they can go wrong with any of them other than maybe Utah Hockey Club. And I know we kind of saw that happen with the Washington Commanders now. They went to the Washington football team. It's kind of like the European style of naming. That's boring. It's just boring. I know that's like a thing they do all around the world, but like you have the name to have you have a chance to have a cool mascot and you can just be Utah instead. Nah. That's dumb. It's boring, it's no fun, and it's just bland. You have the opportunity to create something awesome, a brand new franchise, bring life into hockey in Utah. Utah already has a really big hockey fan base out there with the Utah Grizzlies. There's an AHL program, like the minor leagues of hockey, has a team down there that is called the Utah Grizzlies. They have brought in a lot of fans. Utah's a big hockey market, and it's exciting to see hockey come back to Utah. It's very exciting. These are the same people that own the Utah Jazz. The Jazz just did a rebrand, bringing back their purple uniforms, which, thank God, those are so much better than the highlighter yellow that they have right now. So So far, they're 1 for 1 on their new uniform slash rebrands, and I'm hoping they continue this trend with the new hockey franchise out there in Utah. But yeah, if I had to pick any of them, my favorite would be the Utah Yeti or the Mammoth. Those are the ones that I'm circling here. But I love all the names. I just hope they don't go with Utah Hockey Club, because you can do better than that, Utah. I know you can. But anyway, love to hear your guys' thoughts on any of this. In tomorrow's show, we are going to do NHL Stanley Cup final predictions. We're going to do breakdown of the very first game 1 of the NBA Finals and any other major break. We'll do some MLB power rankings as well too, I believe. I think Friday power rankings is what we'll start to do. And any other major breaking news that happened around the world of sports. I appreciate all of you guys so much for tuning in and watching today's show, Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I will see you same time, same place tomorrow. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I kinda feel like it's for me.